Welcome everybody to this episode of O365A. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Microsoft Mesh, virtual reality, the Metaverse. It's getting a lot of attention these days. And on this episode, we're going to interview, and we're lucky enough to have Microsoft MVP, Vesa Nopanen. And welcome, Vesa. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Curtis.
Why don't you do a little intro about yourself before we talk about Microsoft Mesh?
All right, certainly. My name is Vesa Nopanen, and please do call me Vesku. That's the usual name I go by. I'm a principal consultant for Metaverse and future work at Sulava, which is a consultancy company in Finland. And so, I work a lot with the Metaverse side of business, and also let's not forget my kind of a first passion here, which continues to be the passion of mine, is Microsoft Teams, of course, because everything is coming to work through Teams anyway. So what I've been doing recently, I have had a really interesting projects. I was involved at the healthcare side and for example, one insurance company side. So how to use the Metaverse in a very, of course, broad sense, but you could talk about digital twins, IoT, and bringing that information together. So it's just not avatars and funny avatars and funny cartoonish faces. Metaverse is a lot more than that.
Well, that's a good segue into what I wanted to inform our listeners about, because you hear a lot about Metaverse, hear a lot about Mesh. There's, of course, the avatars available in Teams. So why don't we just break it down and do a all-up sort of high-level summary of what exactly, when we say Microsoft Metaverse, what components does it include, and what's practically available today that organizations can take advantage of?
So I have a couple of hours, right? Okay, I try to make it really short. Thinking about the Metaverse, I guess overall, not just Microsoft Metaverse, but usually the Metaverse is coming from in three main areas. You have a consumer side. That's what we are seeing with the decentralized land and NFTs and everything like that. That's happening there. That's the hype a lot about. And so we are not touching the consumer side today any more than that probably, but the very interesting part is going to be the enterprise Metaverse. So you're talking about the commercial use, how you are utilizing, for example, these virtual spaces, how you are utilizing augmented reality on the enterprise level. So it's usually you could talk about those virtual worlds, you could talk about meetings in Metaverse avatars and that area. That's basically how we are going to be more productive, how we can work better on what we are doing, especially to information worker, but also to field workers and everybody who's involved, because it's a kind of a big thing. And the final part or kind of a last big part is the industrial Metaverse. That's what is already very well advanced compared to these other parts today. So that's and then it includes the most of the components as well. What are the building blocks there? For example, digital twins. That's one of the services running on Azure. IoT. Hey, that's an old thing. It's been here 20 years now, something like that. And IoT is very crucial for that. So you are creating these synchronized digital twins that have a really good connection to the physical world. That's closing the kind of gap between the physical and digital one and bringing the information together. And once you have the digital twin and all the information, that's when you can start applying machine learning and AI to have a kind of predictions and kind of insights what's happening. And that's very important in the industrial level, especially you have a manufacturing process or whatever process you are running. You are building something, you have things on the side. And for example, you might have sensors that are reading the information from the facility. So you have a digital twin of the building. And since it can be synchronized, then you are again controlling the building. And so yes, you can see I'm passionate about this. And I really love the idea of bringing the physical world to the digital one and putting it back there to the physical one as well. Because when you do something in the digital world, it can reflect to the physical one through these sensors and actuators and valves and whatever is the mechanism that can control the physical processes there. It could be just simple as changing the temperature. So you have intelligent houses or buildings and that sort of thing. But the one big part of that, all that, what's also available is the AI. So you can starting to analyze things and use that data and you use that to create those insights to help you work better. So as you can see, the industrial metaverse is already here. It's been on the aviation industry over 20 years. They've been doing that. In the process industry, they started that in a very, very, very broad sense in the 70s because they had a kind of digital twin of the process, and they were able to simulate and try things already at that time. And since I have automation technology background, that was a very kind of interesting and kind of a very big vibe for me. Okay, this is a circle closing, and we are again thinking about this, but this time it's going to be much more faster, much more easier, and you can use it in much more other places than just in a very kind of in a factory, for example. So I still have a bit of time.
No, that's a really good context because I think anyone who's involved in the Microsoft efforts, you know where it fits in the overall, strategy that different industries are starting to use this for. Let's talk about the Microsoft effort. So of course we have Microsoft Mesh. Can you just break down for us what exactly that entails, like what pieces, just at a high level?
Well, Microsoft Mesh seems to be kind of collaboration platform or enabler. It can enable us to have a collaboration in the metaverse. So it kind of have this one of the pieces we've seen already, the avatars. They are in private preview still at the moment, but people can use them. Quite a lot of people are using them. So you can have your digital representation of yourself in a meeting. And what we are, of course, waiting is kind of a mesh for Teams, so we can have meetings in the immersive environment. So we have a virtual space. And in that virtual space, we can use the whiteboard. And if we have a headset with the controllers or hand tracking, then we can draw on the whiteboard. And we can see the presentation at the same time. And that's the big thing. In today's Teams meeting, you see either a whiteboard or the presentation. And in the mesh version of that, you can see the both at the same time. So you are in there and you can collaborate with people. For example, Michael and I could be talking next to the whiteboard, and you three could be talking on the other side of the room together. So we can create instant breakout teams there, or not rooms, but teams or groups, and we can exchange ideas and then have perhaps the presentation going and talk between ourselves without perhaps interrupting the speaker. But because the spatial audio can really help with that. It's just not one for everyone, like in Teams meetings. We can't really talk overlapping each other because nobody can make any sense of that. But in the metaverse immersive side, you can select the person you talk to because you are moving close to that person. And then the other ones who are farther away, they don't hear that, or they might be hearing something very kind of muted. And when they go closer, they can hear the conversation to begin, hey, this sounds interesting. I want to stick around and hear what they have to say. So something like you experience in the conferences and you just overhear something and you go there and tag along, for example. And I think that's the big thing. And the final part would be the kind of a custom worlds, something they can create. They were showing that in Davos, they created the blog post about the World Economic Forum, and they had built some spaces there, and the people were able to join those events and can see from their perspective, like you are in there, so you can have a more empathy and understanding of the situation and have a talk going on. So it's a custom word, so it's just not a meeting, but it's something more. And so that's really those three big parts of the mesh they are talking about. And of course, the custom words should mean that, okay, we have a mesh platform, so we can build those words ourselves.
Got it. And before I turn it over to Dino, just to get practical about mesh, I think it's a separate app like the mesh experience right now. But of course, in Teams, part of mesh is the avatar experience, right?
Yeah, in Teams, you can have the avatar experience. Okay, let me demonstrate.
Sure.
So I should be able to put on my avatar. It takes a few moments, but I turn off the camera and let's see if everything goes. But yeah, okay, here's my avatar with let's change the background. It's kind of typical Finnish mood, for example, there. No smiling, right? Or I can go from to your continent, have a bit of change there, or I can move left or move right, or have a bit of zoom there if I want. So you can do kind of things. But of course, the big thing about the avatar is that, yeah, I can use these in meetings. I can reduce my meeting fatigue because I don't have to have a camera on. I wouldn't have to worry about having the right shirt and etc. But I still have a face in the meeting, so people may not forget me that way. And of course, you can click around these different kind of reactions. And if I use a reaction here, it can replicate that to the avatar as well. So you have something you want to do. It's a lot of that is a very huge kind of big kind of movements like this and hey, let's dab. But I think using these smaller ones, it's going to be much more effective. I'm still paying attention in the meeting, even when my camera is off. So that's kind of a stuff we can use with avatars in meetings. And of course, that's kind of first step that's coming to, okay, let's get people used to these avatars, because that's something, it's not going to be easy. That's a huge adoption project. Organizations are facing, because it's not for everyone and feels odd. Just like somebody was using smiles and stuff into emails during 90s. Yeah. So it can be a difficult thing for people.
Yeah.
It's a good segue, Vesku. I was going to ask you about your thoughts on avatars. I mean, I've had a chance to play with them for a little while, and I'm struggling personally to see the use case, and wanted to explore that with you, because I'm wondering what enhancements might be coming. I could think there might be. I understand the meeting fatigue issue, and people may not want to have video on, so maybe it is a next step. But maybe let's explore that and talk a little bit more about that, and perhaps where you think they may be improving it. Like, one enhancement would be, I think it should leverage the camera to actually see my facial expressions, so I don't have to click on the actual motion that I want. I can just wave my hands and it'll follow me. That might be interesting as well. But I'll turn it over to you to maybe give us your thoughts on that.
Well, they haven't talked much, but that was mentioned that hope it should be on their backlog somewhere, or they should be thinking about that you have the webcam on. Yeah, it's kind of a contradiction here, because you may not want to have your webcam on, but then when you have the webcam on, it might reflect your emotions or expressions. And that's of course something I would like to see, because it's not very engaging to having to click around those actions, because it takes a lot of kind of a concentration. So I think the best thing would be that they bring in that webcam, and it can read your expressions and reflect them back to the meeting, and have at least something in there. And for the use cases of avatars, Well, of course, the meeting fatigue is something. We can see a lot of meetings where camera is off. People don't want to turn them on, and Avatar is a very good improvement of that. It's not replacing our faces. This is much more expressive than the avatars, 5 avatars talking to each other would be, at least in this point. And so our faces carry on. We are not obsolete yet, but then of course I'm thinking about all the situations when I can't really use the camera. Some people are having snack, lunch, whatever there. You don't really want to look at somebody eating. or they have a very crazy moment going on, so they are going back and forth. They are not on the camera all the time, so it can be really distracting if something's happening. One of the things is that you are on the move. It might not be a very good idea to have your video again on the cell phone and you are walking around or something. It can be distracting, or it can be actually very tiresome if you're just trying to hold it still. And so those are the first obvious ones. But of course, I heard stuff Microsoft has been doing with the avatars. They've had some fun too. So you can, well, we can have some fun, but we've had a lot of Teams meetings during these few years. So I think the avatars is something that's breaking the routine as well. So it's refreshing. And yeah, Microsoft told in an event, ESPC, I recall when they were talking about the avatars and mesh, and it's about, okay, they have avatars dance parties. And it's because there are so many large movements and emotions you can put in, and so you can have fun. You can have different kinds of avatars. I was showing you just the official one, but I have more relaxed ones. And if I had remembered the red shirt syndrome here, I could have put on the red shirt for the avatar just for the kicks of that, because I don't have a red shirt. But yeah, I think you can express things in a different way, and on top of those, there's also the matter of inclusion and diversity part. You may want to express yourself in a certain way, and it may not reflect your physical self, or otherwise you want to have more like business look or professional look when you are not. Some people might not take you seriously, but through the avatar they don't really have an opinion because they don't see the real you, but they just hear what you have to say, and that's a very important part, because I heard about the one person, ethical person, who was in the company where there were a lot of, like, more or less like us, like middle-aged old white men in the board and in the management and stuff, and he just made his avatar to look like them in that sense. So his background wasn't visible there. So that's not an ideal situation for the company. I think there's a lot of improvement in the culture there, but that's the thing, that if you feel about your background, you might have something that's prohibiting them to listen what you really have to say, and that's when avatars can help.
Awesome. So Vesku just had some questions around, given the recent, I guess, shutting down of Altspace and the layoffs, specifically around like the Mesh and HoloLens product groups, how do you think that may or may not affect the future of these integrations with Teams?
Let's say I don't think it's going to affect badly, because Metaverse and Mesh is still on a very high focus for Microsoft. So I don't think a lot of people were laid off from the Mesh team exactly, or at least I haven't heard. Perhaps some had some kind of a affiliation there, but mostly I think the hit was more on the mixed reality part on some places, like the RTK team was dissolved, and it's a kind of a I think that's it's a big thing, and I think that's a bit weird they did that. But I have to add that I just read my time this morning, 12 hours ago, a LinkedIn post from that team lead that's just saying, okay, take it easy for a while. MRTK is not dead. So it's not going to be a black and white situation there. We don't know what's really happening behind those scenes, and how they are going to continue to support. And I think that's one of the mixed reality parts. I guess the thing that the deal with the U.S. Department of Defense wasn't it didn't go forward that well. I think it went south more or less now because they didn't get a new budget and new investments. So it's very logical that, of course, it affects some of the people there because they lost, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of or billions of investments there, or buying those devices and buying more project. But on the other hand, at the same time, they got research money, $40 million, I guess, for developing it further. So I don't think it's going to be dead in any way in that sense, but it may take a breather on some areas. And as for Mesh and Altspace, I think when the Microsoft announced the Meta partnership during October last year, and they announced that the Mesh for Teams is coming for MetaQuest devices. So I was starting to already think back then that, okay, what's going to happen with Altspace, because Meta is developing the Meta Horizon world, and so it might be a bit conflicting. And in that sense, the more I see Microsoft is focusing on enterprises and the industrial level, the consumer tool doesn't make that much sense. So and they had resources running and keeping the Altspace breathing and up and running, so they can now divert those resources to Mesh. So they haven't stopped developing Mesh or haven't stopped developing this. I don't know what's happening with resourcing, of course, and of course Microsoft doesn't tell that. But the way it looks like the blog post about the Mesh environments did for World Economic Forum, for example, and what they are showcasing there, it looks like, okay, things are going forward. But yeah, it's taking probably more time than they anticipated back then. So that's kind of a short version of that, I guess.
I think that's a good segue into what I was thinking we could talk about. So we have Mesh, and some of the changes there. Mesh was like everyone was talking about Mesh, so everyone kind of jumped into that space. But at the same time, we're seeing kind of the staffing changes on the Mesh side or the Metaverse side. We're seeing an increased interest around the AI initiatives like OpenAI and ChatGPT and all the stuff that Microsoft's doing there. How do you see that kind of mingling with Mesh and maybe some of the more focus being poured in that space?
Well, I love AI, and the way I've been talking about the Metaverse is that AI is there. It's a very kind of a thing that converging all these different parts together, because it's there using all the data and kind of helping us to work better. That's the AIs in everywhere, because we have seen how it's been developed during the past year. For example, it's been taking huge leaps forward, and yes, I think the OpenAI and ChatGPT is in a very good hype today, and I think one of the reasons is that it's kind of it's very awesome, because what you can do with those tools, how you can use them to generate images, texts, avatars, whatever you want to start using the AI for. Text for anything, it's like there's so many possibilities, and of course on the understanding what's the language understanding the documents, summarizing information. That's all we need for the productivity all the time. And more we have information like synchronized digital twins and pushing there, we need more and more AI to help us to cope with all that information so we can focus on essential. So we don't have to read the log file with 1 million rows anymore, but we can actually just put it to AI and we can get the kind of idea what's wrong in there. I guess you all have been doing that, reading those long, very long log files in the past. At least I have.
Yeah. I mean, it's great just putting people's heads on music videos and having them sing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but I think like you said, the Chat GPT, like generating summaries, generating content based on a topic, even session details and stuff like that, or code is actually pretty interesting. What's happening with ChatGPT?
Oh yeah, it's that's very interesting, but that's not the only generative AI tool that's generating text, for example. That's just one of those which is very highly out now. And of course, Microsoft is using that, and they just announced Teams Premium yesterday, and or was today, yeah. And there was this pass about intelligent recap. So it's going to be using ChatGPT 3.5 to understand the transcript and pick up those tasks and pick up the summarization of that. So we will be seeing the AI to move into all these things. And of course, I think it's part of the metaverse. It's using the digital tools, whatever the digital world is helping us to do better in the physical world as well. And that's why it's a very big thing there. And of course, I can't wait to see those bots appear into Mesh. Like with this AI stuff, you can have really the digital assistant that's way better than Siri or whatever they can do, because it can really understand the language. It understands what you are asking in a very complex sense. Of course, if you are trying out the ChatGPT today, keep in mind that it was kind of the data it includes is 2 years old. It's not perfect either, so don't just generate something and push it out, because eventually you will fail. But I don't know, just out of curiosity, because we have cameras on, have you been really using ChatGPT at your work or generate meaningful content, not just playing around like Michael? Yeah. Because
I think there's still the whole data, putting corporate data into an open source free open source product. I mean, now that there's the Azure Services, I think that's where you start to see some scenarios where using it for the enterprise and meeting whatever data requirements you need from a regulatory point of view. I know people write, hey, generate code for this scenario, and it's pretty good, but you still have to understand the code to know is it actually going to work or not.
Yeah, and you had a really good point about don't put your enterprise data there, don't put the corporate data, but how you can use that is that you can generate, for example, the first draft, and then you start working on that. You are generating email, you are doing marketing content, you are doing something that's content producing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these capabilities coming to Word, PowerPoint, even Excel probably, and all the tools we are using in Microsoft Cloud already. So we don't have to have that problem of staring at the blank screen and think about how do I get started. But instead you have your digital assistant and you put in some ideas, because the beauty in ChatGPT is that you just don't generate one thing. You can keep on putting more input and ask, okay, I don't really like this style. Can it be more professional or more relaxed? And it will generate it forward. Or hey, I forgot to add about the metaverse or artificial intelligence there. Could you add it there? And you have the first draft there that you can then just tweak and put it forward. We had a really good fun, thinking about doing one training course. And so I was using the ChatGPT for creating the description. And you just get some ideas. So it's inspiring stuff. And then you take the text and then you modify it, because it's not perfect. It's far from that, but it kind of helps you to be more productive and save a lot of time. I've heard really good cases about people saving big amounts of time, like saving, like I don't know, doing 1 hour work, 15 minutes for 1 hour work. Basically, you are saving 45 minutes on the content producing.
Yeah, definitely. And we subject to your point, if the team's meetings able to go to those natural language processors, that's going to open the door to a huge boost in productivity for meetings, as you discussed. So certainly a lot to look forward to. Maybe we'll cap it at that, because we've been at it for about half an hour here. But Vesku, thank you so much for coming on and explaining the metaverse to us, and mesh and avatars. And this is going to be a real exciting area to watch. I think we should set a date 1 year in the future. Right now, we can have you back on, and we'll see where all this is. Cool.
Of course.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you for having me here.